Thank you, Liz. This evening, we have Theresa Lina, who is an SVPMA board advisor and an industry expert, and a very good author who was sharing her expertise in product market fit and some of the steps that you can take to discover proper market selection for your product and company. And very excited to hear Theresa speak. She always does a great job, and it's a very engaging speaker. And so with that, I'll hand it off to Theresa. Take it away.
Thank you, Tom. As I bring up my screen, I'm going to tell you that I'm getting the dreaded unstable internet connection every now and then. And I've prearranged with Tom to have you all go out into breakout rooms if I end up with a problem. First, I'll try turning off my camera, but while we get it sorted, what I want you to do, if you get sent into breakout rooms, is talk about some of the points I've made and some of the challenges you're facing or have faced in the past with market selection, or what you've seen your company struggle with. So take some notes as I talk. I'm going to try to make this a very practical, very applicable, something you can start working with, right away type of talk. And also we can be informal. If you have questions as we go, raise your hand, or hopefully I'll see it, and I'll try to keep an eye on the chat as well, although sometimes I kind of get into a groove and forget to look. So with that, why don't we get started with, first of all, I am the author of Be the Go-To, and some of what I'm going to be sharing tonight is material drawn from my book, and I build on it. My book is on a broader topic, which is really, we all think we're so unique. And when you're up close and can examine with a microscope, we are unique, our companies, as individuals, as practitioners. But the problem is most of the market sees us from a distance and we all look and sound the same. So the real issue that I address in the book is how, the lack of clear, sustainable differentiation that most companies deal with, and methodology for overcoming that and establishing yourself actually as the go-to in a market, which allows you to charge premium prices and deliver such high value that customers are happy to pay those premium prices. And I lay out a methodology for doing this. It's a strategy framework called the Apollo Method for Market Dominance. But we're going to talk tonight about just one dimension of that. And the issue is product market fit. And the big problem with it is it's back-ass words. So in my mind, I would like to see us get rid of that term, because it implies that you have a product and you're looking for some place in the market that wants it. And instead, we need market and then product. And really, even more ideally, we start with the market. We identify problems in the market. We decide which problem we're going to focus on, and then we develop the solution. So a very market-driven approach to coming up with products and services. So, what we don't want to be, and what many companies are, and what the term product market fit implies, is that we are a solution looking for a problem. And instead, you're much better off if you start with the market. So that's a lot of what we're going to focus on tonight. Because really what the market wants to know is, what problem do you solve and who do you solve it for? Then they want to know how you solve it and what makes you special. But those first two questions often are missing. So the big issue really, and what I've noticed over the years in working with a lot of organizations, and this whether it's at the company level, whether it's at the product level, whether it's at the business unit level, the regional level, whatever it is, most organizations go after too large a market. So you have this massive dispersed market with all these different segments, and they say, yes, this is our market. And in reality, especially as you're getting started, it's just too much to go after, because you have tons of competitors, tons of noise. You have major dilution of effort, because what you're doing out there in the market is so dispersed that what you do over here is not helping you over here. you end up with, many more diverse needs, or much more diverse needs among your buyers. So you end up having to adjust and adapt yourself to try to meet, you see this in SaaS, for example, tons of product features that, the features that they're dying for aren't important to the features to this part of the market, and they want features that they don't care about, and you get pulled in too many different directions. So there's a long list of reasons why we need to focus when it comes to markets. And I used to, many years ago, have to get into big debates with executives about where they were arguing against market focus and telling me, no, we can't narrow down. That's too dangerous. And now I find myself having to argue that point less. It seems to be, quite readily accepted wisdom. But just to give you an illustration of how many organizations struggle with this and how long that struggle has been going on, the reason that I have the name of the methodology is the Apollo Method for Market Dominance is because even the US space program was facing problems going after too broad of a market. So back in the late 50s, we had many different space organizations. We had many different organizations in the government that were focused on space, doing different things all over the place. We had lots of organizations, we had lots of initiatives, and we kept losing. We kept losing to the Russians because our efforts weren't focused. And every time we were trying to have some kind of achievement, they quickly beat us to it. So finally, President Kennedy asked Vice President Johnson at the time, he said, look, go out and figure out, where can we win? Where can we dominate? What achievement would make us the clear dominant force in space? And that's when Kennedy came up. Johnson recommended the moon and said, look, if we can take a person to the moon and get them home alive, we will have the things that it takes to do that will mean that we have won. And so that's when Kennedy declared the moonshot. And of course, they succeeded in doing that. And in my research for the book, I actually looked heavily at this as a case study. And it turns out that many of the things they had to do to put a man on the moon are the same things businesses have to do to establish themselves as go-tos in a market. But the first thing started with focus. And so that's the key. If you are a drop of ink, and in many cases you are, if you're starting out with a new product or some kind of innovation, do you want to be a drop of ink in the ocean, or do you want to be a drop of ink in a glass of water? Where are you going to get it noticed first? So that's really what you're trying to do, is figure out where can we get that foot, like that grip, get a grip on the market, get that beachhead, as many of you have heard it. So we know now that focus is of real importance, but where do you start? How do you decide which markets you're going to focus on? And remember, and this is something I have to constantly talk to executives about, a focused, narrowly defined market does not mean it has to be small. Narrow and small are not the same thing. A specifically defined market can still be massive. It can be multi-billion-dollar market, but still be super, super specific. So I want to give you an example of a company that we often think of as serving everybody on the planet, but I don't know that everybody's aware of just what Facebook's progression was in terms of how it started targeting. So first, it started with one mailing list within Harvard. So one mailing list, and then they opened membership up to the rest of Harvard. Then they opened it up to just Stanford, Columbia, and Yale. And I remember this personally because I was able to get a Facebook account early on because of my Stanford email address at the time. So, it was very limited as to who could get in there. Then it opened up to the Ivy League and Boston area colleges. Then it kind of started exploding. So US and Canadian universities. Then they started opening it up. They picked 21 UK universities and others around the world. So you had to have specific email addresses to get an account at Facebook at this time. Then they started a high school version. Then they selected just a handful of companies. You had to have an email address at that company to get in. And then it just went on from there. So you can see, another way to draw this picture, and a way that I encourage companies to think about it, is as a dartboard. So what I like to use is a target market dartboard, where you define that core target, that sweet spot, where what's your bullseye of who you're going to serve, and then what's the next best opportunity out from that, and the next best opportunity from that. And you want adjacent markets. You want markets that have something in common, so that your credentials in one market are going to apply to the next market. Very often, companies will pick, I call it Swiss cheese, the Swiss cheese approach to identifying target segments, where they have this market over here, and this market over here, and this market over here, but none of it builds on each other. And so you want to make sure that you're creating. So with Facebook, this got out to them, and they got out, people here knew people here, and the word started spreading. People here knew people here. And so that's how we started getting that viral growth that Facebook experienced back in the very beginning. And you need to remember that Facebook was not the first social media social media company at the time, not the first connection-oriented company. You had MySpace, which was the behemoth at the time. You had, I think there was a company called 6 Degrees. There were a whole bunch, because all of a sudden it was a big trend. There were lots of these kinds of companies, but what made Facebook powerful was the strength of the connections between these markets that they started penetrating, and the relationships between these people. They were strong connections, and that's what allowed them to get a real, get that beachhead, particularly when they went from Stanford, Columbia, and Yale up to, all of the Ivy League and those Boston area universities and colleges. And then, of course, it just took off like wildfire from there. So how do you narrow down? So, you've got this massive universe. The picture, this is not meant to be legible, but the picture I'm using here is this. It's a marketing technology landscape that chiefmartech.com puts out every year. They've been putting it out since, I think, 2005 or something like that, showing each year. It started with 150 companies. Now it's up to, I think, 8,000. Maybe this year it's got to be much higher than that. But ignore the logos that you can't read. No matter what market you're talking about, you've got a massive number of players, and you've got a massive, you've got several uber segments, and then you've got lots of segments within. Whether you're talking about an industry, a geography, a particular demographic, a particular technology area, whatever it may be, how do you figure out who you're going to serve? So I like to tell people that, it makes things much easier if you start with a process of elimination. So a simple little illustration of how effective this can be is, one day I sat down to do a maze, because I love puzzles. And I thought, what? I think I see all these dead ends, like that's a dead end, that's a dead end, dead end. I think I'm just going to color in shade in all the areas that won't take me anywhere. They're bad, they're dead ends. And then I'll try to solve the puzzle. Let's get rid of the obvious, garbage. Well, by the time I got done, I had my path, exactly what the solution was. And this is exactly how it works when you try to do market selection. If you start with a process of elimination and get rid of all the bad fits, it really helps you start to get focused and narrow down. So here's a little process, a simple little tool, and you can get these graphics or similar ones. I have the less professionally designed ones here so that I can animate them a little bit. But on apollomethod.com, you don't have to buy the book to get them. They are in the book, and I do step through some of these processes in the book. But you can also get them for free on apollomethod.com. So first, start with your strength. What are your distinctive, and I mean, what makes you different, your distinctive competencies, other strengths, other qualities and potential that you have as an organization, or you can do this individually for your career. If you're trying to figure out how to focus your career and stop, if you feel commoditized, like, oh my God, there are 50 million software engineers out there with my skills, where can I go make a name for myself? You can do this process for yourself. So figure out what your strengths are, and then overlay that with the market characteristics, values, and unmet needs. So what's going on in the market? What are your strengths? And that directs you toward some of your initial target market candidates. So you just get that overlay of what I'm good at, or what we as a company are good at, what our product is good at, what does the market need? Find the overlay. Now we start eliminating. So first, get rid of poor fits. Okay, so that market hates to spend money. Like, I don't really personally target law firms so much because they aren't particularly strategic. They don't like to spend money. They unless it's on directly on a case or what have you. So eliminate poor fits. Eliminate markets that just anybody could just as easily serve as you, because there are a lot of those. So, a lot of people could serve some of the markets out there because you don't have specific, unique qualifications in that market. So get rid of those. And that starts to point you to a smaller subset of where you can provide unique value. So now we don't have necessarily your bullseye at this point, but we have gotten rid of a lot of what's out there. You've narrowed it from this whole circle to this little part right here. So that's a starting point. Now, there are lots of ways to slice and dice markets. B2B, we often look at industry, we look at sub areas within industry, company size is a common one, geography. I often recommend that people give thought to corporate culture. So, if you have a particular set of values and you have strong values in that area, there are going to be some industries that don't share your values. And so don't serve them. That's going to be a mismatch. Functional area, technology, et cetera. On B2C, we have very common, various demographic characteristics that people segment on. Geography, we look at other psychographic profile and other behavioral profiles and so on. That's a whole science unto itself. And there are a lot of people who are, deep experts in that, but you can also make it simple when you're trying to kind of just eliminate the obvious. One area that I think is too often overlooked, I rarely hear people talk about it, and I'm going to recommend, I think Tom, you had this on your slide, Crossing the Chasm. That book is now 20 plus years old, and it's an oldie but goodie. What I love about that book is it's a wonderful primer on strategic marketing. And Jeffrey Moore in there talks about the innovation adoption curve. Now, this goes back actually to the early 20th century, the early 1900s. There were many studies along the way, but what they were initially, what the precursor to this, or the origin, is they were trying to figure out what are the patterns for when farmers adopt new agricultural technology, and technology in small letters back then. But what are the patterns? And they started noticing that you had the small number of what they ended up calling innovators, who are the first to jump on something before anybody else even has thought about it, and they don't care that it's not well thought through. They don't care that there weaknesses or issues. They're going to, it was the first people the people who were using AI, Chat GPT when it was in beta form. People who are willing to experiment. Many of you are probably innovators. The technology doesn't have to be perfect. You're willing to put up with flaws. It's the first people that bought the Tesla Roadster. They didn't care that it was breaking down all the time. They were just excited to have something, new and really innovative. Then you have early adopters who they want to see what happens with the innovators first. So they aren't going to be out there necessarily buying the first Roadsters, especially they're not putting in the order before the car has come out. They're going to wait and see how it works, but they're very quick to adopt. Then you have the early majority. They need to see some success stories. They need to see proof. You have late majority. They're not going to adopt until we actually peaked with the market. And then laggards are the ones they don't make the transition until they absolutely have to. These are the companies that still have COBOL. This is really important. Jeffrey Moore talks about this. The chasm concept he lays out in his book talks about that there's a gap. Often it's between the early adopters and the early majority, and this is where it's a chasm right here. And startups often fall into the chasm because they can't sustain themselves in that gap of market adoption between early adopters and early majority. What I was saying earlier about the farmers, so there were numerous studies over the decades, and then Rogers, and I'm blanking right now on his first name, he wrote a book in the early 1960s, Diffusion of Innovations, and that's where he laid out this curve. And then it's been used in various capacities since then. But this is a very important concept, and what you want to do is you want to pay attention, what's going on with these segments that you're thinking about. Where are they on this innovation adoption curve? People often think about this in terms of buyers, but you want to also look at your market segments and see, well, if they're up here, they are not going to be the center of your bullseye. They're not going to pull the trigger. They may be interested in hearing what you have to say. I mean, I went through this with a client recently where he was convinced that this particular, now in this case it was an account, but he was convinced of this particular account because they were so interested in what he was talking about that they were going to buy quickly. And I was like, I don't think so. I think they're early majority. I don't think they're going to be, maybe they'll be early adopters. They're not going to be innovators. They're not going to they're not going to be the first to sign up for what you're doing. And sure enough, they have dragged their feet and they want to see proof. So he has spent a lot of time and energy on them. And I say with these early majority, they may be curious, but they're kind of innovation curious, but certainly, make your materials available to them, say in webinars and other mechanisms, but don't invest a huge amount of account development and selling time on them until you know that they're in the appropriate phase. You want to put your energy into the innovators first, and maybe some of the early adopters, the early adopters. So that's a mistake I see a lot of companies making in how they choose their markets, and then of course how they target their prospects. So back to how we get from that super crowded market back here, and you're starting to go through your process of elimination here. What process can you use for this? What tools can you use to help you figure out who to eliminate? So one useful tool is to, this is just a simple, now granted, if you have data available to you, if you have data scientists who can help you with these markets, if you have a Gartner subscription, if you have access to market experts, by all means use that. But a useful way to go about this is to put your targets, that subset you've now narrowed it down to. You can create a tool, and I did a recent project like this with a company, and we were doing just a quick and dirty. The goal was to get some focus for them because they were kind of going after anybody and everybody. and we wanted to see, where are the obvious poor fits. This is not meant to be legible because I don't want you to necessarily see their criteria. But what we did is we developed a set of criteria, roughly 90 criteria items, checklist items by category. And then we went and rated, or just a yes or no. And we didn't even have to fill this out all the way because it was so obvious when you looked down the criteria. It just immediately eliminated even more sectors. And in their case, they were doing industry. And within industry, let's say within automotive, there are probably 30 or 40 subsegments within automotive. And so it allowed us to quickly eliminate a bunch, especially when we looked at where they were in the innovation adoption curve, because what this company is doing is quite innovative. So that's a very useful tool for helping you. And what it also does is it gives you ammunition when you start getting pushback from other stakeholders in the organization, your investors, others who are trying to influence you to serve certain markets. You have criteria and you can say, look, this market is a terrible fit for us. So we don't share the same values. They shop only on price. They don't value added value. They have a super long drawn out sales cycle. The proposal process alone would sink our company. You have all kinds of ammunition to work with. So some examples of types of categories of criteria, what are the synergies with the rest of the company? Let's say you're a product management group or you're a product group within the company. You want to look at, are there any synergies? Because we want to be able to draw on the power of the rest of the company in helping us penetrate whatever markets we're going after. You also want to make sure it's similar to other sectors maybe that you already serve, that there are some commonalities and synergies there, that some of your credentials, for example, will carry over, that one market will be able to relate to the business problems of the other market. You want to make sure the sector is attractive. It's growing quickly. They spend money. They move quickly. A big one is how much change is happening. Because to me, when I hear that change is happening, oops, did I blip out?
You blipped out for about 20, or not even 20 seconds, probably close to 50.
Where did I lose you? Where did I lose you?
You were talking about easy to sell and market, and kind of most of the way through the slide, I believe.
I think it was
okay.
you.
It didn't blip out for me.
It didn't blip out for me. She was fine. I think it was on your end, Tom.
I apologize then.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, that's good. That not good for you, Tom, but good for me. So, a big one, when I see that a sector is going through a lot of change, I hear ka-ching, ka-ching, because that's when companies spend money. Change is when they invest in technology, they invest in process improvements, they invest in new tools. The automotive industry is a good example right now because they are they're having to do a major transformation to electric, and all the downstream sectors and organizations that are going to be affected. The carburetor companies, what are they going to do to shift their businesses? So change is a good thing. I don't think I have that on this list, but that's another one to consider. So there are a lot of different factors, and within each of these, that like on the previous example I just showed you, we had 10 or 12 very specific checklist items for each of these categories. Other resources you can rely upon are existing customers. Talk to your customers, talk to other buyers out in the market, leverage your sales force, especially if you're a B2B organization, or if you have, even in B2C, very often you have a sales force and distribution channels. Rely on your distributors. You want to talk to people around the company, get your hands on secondary research, talk to market analysts. And another one that people don't rely on as much as they should, but well-connected influencers and power brokers in your space. So most sectors have just a tiny little number of very powerful people who know everybody in that sector. And the more narrowly defined your sector is, the better you can define, or you can, the more easily you can identify who those power brokers and influencers are. They may be the heads of the trade organization for that sector. They may be investors in that sector. They may be former CEOs or other senior executives who have tentacles out to, all the major players in that sector. So go talk to these people, get their thoughts. So there are a lot of sources of intel you can go after. And the goal again is to get this target dartboard defined and get agreement on what's our bullseye, and define that and formalize it so that you can focus your sales efforts, focus the marketing efforts, focus everybody in the company on that core target, so that you get those synergies going. Otherwise, you have because what happens when you're out selling, maybe that person didn't buy from you, but they talk to other people and they might mention you to other people. So the more tightly defined your market is, the more likely you're going to get those serendipitous opportunities. And when you focus like this, your resources are focused, your market presence is focused, you get a much better market fit with, back to the term I don't really like, but I'll use it because I know you all use it every day, product market fit. You get much better fit and traction in the marketplace, and you do get that beachhead market that allows you to then expand from there. So you get known, you get famous, and then those adjacent markets start to hear about you as well. So I'm running really fast here. Do you guys show me in the chat whether you want to take a little time to go into a breakout session and talk about a little bit of what I've discussed? Or do you want me to just open up microphones and make this an open discussion? I'm trying to see how many people. We have 35 people. Show me what your preference would be. Let me see some comments. General Q&A. Open the mic. Okay. All right. Okay. Got it. We've got a consensus. Okay. Well, let me give you a quick summary of the secrets, and then we'll turn this into an open discussion. So summary, and then just building on some of the earlier thoughts. So it came through loud and clear. Focus, focus, focus. It's just so critical. I said narrow doesn't mean small or limited, and thinking in terms of market problems, not back-asswards product fit. Study the market like crazy. Just be insatiably curious. My philosophy is I keep asking questions, I keep digging until I'm not hearing anything new, until I'm hearing the same names over and over again, I'm hearing the same problems over and over again, the same themes. Not that you want to get into an echo chamber, so you got to make sure you're talking and exploring a diverse representation of the space. But when you'll find it, you'll see that after a while you won't be hearing anything new anymore, and you'll have a pretty decent feel and sense and formal research to back it up, because this isn't all just gut instinct. This is fact-based activity here. It's a meaningful analytical process, but you'll have the data to back up your observations and conclusions. You want to start with that process of elimination, and this, what I just described, does not have to be hard or expensive. So in smaller companies with no money, you can simply, interview the subject matter experts, and just, they have their finger on the pulse of what's going on out there. They're going to be able to tell you, what's happening, what's not happening. And you'll, again, you may not get right to that bullseye right away, but you will definitely be able to get rid of obvious bad candidates for markets. And what I find is, like that maze that I showed you, markets often reveal themselves in the course of doing your thoughtful analysis. The answer just presents itself to you. And again, if you're having to guess, if you're having to wing it, if you don't have good evidence to back up, your suspicions about what markets are going to be good fits, then you're doing something wrong. So with that, let's open up the mic and have a conversation about this. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Mark raised your hand.
Okay, Mark.
All right. Is there any different approach for a B2B product versus a B2C product?
I think there's more quantitative data available on B2C. So it's often with B2B, what I find is it's frequently more of a qualitative analysis. Although, of course, companies like Gartner and Forrester and those, we're technology products here mostly. They have data, but a lot of times that data and information is looking back. Now, of course, they do projections, but having been someone who's been involved in creating some of those projections, that's all they are. They're not as, whereas on the consumer side, you have all that data from, all the what gets collected out there. Although, just like with that marketing technology landscape I showed you, there are lots, every day new companies pop up to help B2B companies get that kind of data as well. There are some excellent sources of data out there, but you're going to be doing more qualitative analysis with B2B.
So, Theresa,
Rajesh?
I have a question. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, because the market focus is something that is really very important. The question I have is, a lot of times some big companies will acquire a smaller company which has got good promising technology, and they are serving multiple markets, and they probably have different needs. So when the acquired company and you're the product manager or the product team, how do you focus? Because your team is small, it takes time to scale. And how do you pick which market to go after first? Because when you're part of being a conglomerate, everyone wants you to design a product that fits their markets.
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly why a lot of acquisitions are just disastrous for the acquired company and the acquired product, unless there's unless they're very complementary to each other, and the new product kind of gets folded in as a subcomponent of a bigger solution. But it really does go back to what I just described. If you're getting pressure from the bigger company to broaden your market, you need an evidence-based case for demonstrating why it makes a lot more sense to focus or stay focused until you get enough traction in the market to then go out to that next concentric circle and then that next concentric circle. And if you find yourself getting pulled in a lot of different directions, you can use those criteria you came up with to demonstrate why. Well, I know the healthcare groups want us to come and bring our product over to them, but if we do that, it's going to disperse our efforts. We're going to be that drop of ink in an ocean instead of a drop of ink in a glass of water, until we have more ink. So it really still comes down to the same process I just described. Does that answer your question, or did I miss the mark?
No, that definitely answers the question. Thank you.
Okay. What else?
You mentioned easy to sell. Any comments on when you're working through a sales channel or distributor channel and managing that complexity in terms of frequently I see people try and move into markets because they have a distributor that already is attached to that other particular market, and they might miss some of the other pieces. So I'm wondering if you have any nuances to share around kind of distributors and their input.
Yeah. So again, it really does down to having that, the business case for why a certain market does or doesn't make sense for you and for where you are in your evolution. So, it might make sense for you later, but if you have that target market dartboard, it's a great way to say, look, this is our sweet spot, and there's just little overlap in what, pick, again, just to use industry to make it easy. Well, I have a company that I was working with recently who had this where they were trying to pick, on their list was, they had strength in communications and state and local government. They had some credentials and expertise in financial services, but they were also looking at manufacturing. They were looking at food service. They were looking at all these other far-flung sectors. And, we looked at the characteristics of those, and we said, they just have nothing in common with these other companies. They just couldn't be more different. And, you're just going to be, in a tug of war for resources and for sales attention and for marketing spend. If you go after these, take the Swiss cheese approach, versus financial services has a lot in common with communications companies. They have lots of legacy problems. They're going through digital transformation. They have massive systems they'll never be able to replace because nobody can tell you what's in the code anymore. And, they're still stuck with COBOL. Just a lot more in common with if you really start looking at the characteristics, you start to see who has common characteristics and who's totally different. And that's helpful in making your case to the distributor to say, this, it may not be never, but it's not now, because, we won't be able to follow through.
So Theresa, how do you see the strategy being different for products which already have a significant market share within a particular market segment versus products that are trying to break into that market? And when they develop, they're also, there may be the 5th or 6th or 10th product within a market space. How is the strategy different?
Yeah, well, you're building on areas of strength there, and you want to look at, what your adjacent markets are to where you have your strengths, so that you make sure that I know I keep saying the same thing over and over again, but it does apply to these various situations. You look for those common characteristics for deciding, what are the adjacent markets, and making sure you're not going after a non-contiguous market, one that's just totally different. And it's interesting. So I'm involved in the executive ed program at Stanford, and one of the cases, I don't want to give it away in case anybody ever enrolls in the course, but I'll just say generically that one of our cases is a company that sold. I'm going to change the facts, but. They sold repair parts. I'll make that up. They sold repair parts, and they were looking at getting into the, the RV business. And on the surface, well, of course they shouldn't get into the RV business. They have nothing in common. But when you go through the analysis, you start to realize, and it's not true for these two. I just don't want to give away the case because it's a widely used one in the program, and some people who watch this online may get it in the future. But the bottom line is, on the surface, they look like they have nothing in common. But when you start looking at what it takes to succeed, in this market, and what it takes to succeed in this market, and what the strengths are of the current company, the overlap is almost complete. They ended up getting into that new business and were very successful. So, you know, you're trying to look for those common characteristics and leverage your strengths, leverage that, you know, dominant position in an existing market. Somebody else, Priya, you had your
Priya,
hand up
yeah.
at one point.
Yeah. Hi, Teresa. Nice to see you.
Hi.
Thanks for the talk, and I really learned a lot. Like basically to focus and focus on your strengths. The question I had was in the customer segments that you mentioned. Jeffrey Moore's diagram. How do you identify which segment a particular customer might belong to?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The adapters or
Yeah. So I go into this in my book. Jeffrey Moore talks about it in detail. I give a kind of a the Cliff Notes version in my book because I talk about some other topics. But the quick version is that those innovators are, like I said, they're the people. You start asking yourself a big giveaway is how much evidence do they need in order to jump on the bandwagon? If they're the kind of company or sector that's on the front edge, like, technology, the technology sector is a early adopter, embraces things really quickly before they're proven out. Who got into cloud first? We still have companies that aren't in the cloud. Who was quick to embrace the cloud? Who's being quick to embrace AI? Who's being quick to implement leading edge cybersecurity offerings? So you're looking at the ones who, and often it's the ones who already knew they needed it, and they've been waiting for you to come along. Their reaction to what you're offering and talking about is, "Oh my God, where have you been all of my life?" Like, hell yeah, bring it on. They already knew they needed it. So that's the profile. You're looking for kind of a psychological, behavioral, and cultural profile of an organization and a segment. And then the early adopters, they're not willing to be the guinea pig. Innovators are willing to be the guinea pig because they want to be first and they don't care that it's sloppy. They're in such a hurry that they'll try it and they'll work it out with you. They're going to be the ones that help you improve the product. That's what Steve Blank talks about with the customer development methodology, what lean startup, design thinking. These are mechanisms for working with customers to define, to help you improve and develop your product. Those are the innovators. And early adopters, they want some of the kinks worked out. They're still in a hurry. They're just a little bit more risk averse, and so they're going to wait just a little bit. You can think of that curve as like their risk aversion. The higher they are on risk aversion, the slower they're going to be to adopt. And then early majority, they need case studies. Like when you're coming out with a new product, too many. I see a lot of companies say, "Oh, we got to get case studies into the market. We got to write up case studies," And I'm like, no, the people that you need to be selling to right now, they don't give a flying what about case studies. They want results, and they're going to be willing to. They don't need the proof yet, but the early majority needs case studies. So if you have people asking you for a case study, where have you done this before? You don't need to be talking to them yet. And then late majority and all that on the other side of the curve, we don't even need to think about them at this point.
Thanks.
Anybody else? So can you share your reactions? I'm interested in what you experience and what you see. Tell me how this jives with what you've done or witnessed, or wish you had known about before, or have already done before. And I'm curious to hear from you.
Theresa, I can clearly tell you a little bit about use of automation and robotics in healthcare or hospital space. Is clearly in a very early majority, not even early majority, early adopter phase. And there are some hospital systems that will really take something and try it out. But then there are other hospital systems that will ask for case studies. And then you have the case studies and you have them coming in and visiting the facility. They will want to go and visit other hospital systems that are successfully using my company's robotics and automation solution. And then they'll go back and then they'll go quiet. It's like, wait, you asked for all those things. What happens? Like, we spoke with our risk department and we feel that right now we are just not ready for it, right? And basically, my guidance is that any customer that asks you for a case study or to visit another site that has implemented it, just run away from them because they're not ready for it, right?
Exactly. They are going to waste your time. And because, you want traction with those innovators and those, early adopters, and certainly traction with the innovator and early adopters overall before you're even, paying any attention to the early majority. Yeah.
And sorry, go ahead.
Oh, Theresa, great presentation. Just had a quick question. How will recession or a down market impact the kind of things that one needs to focus on while determining market fit?
Yeah, well, each segment out there that you analyze is going to have a certain sensitivity to recessions. And each recession is different. It's caused by different things and affects different parts of the market. So you want to conclude that in your criteria. So there are recession-proof markets for some industries, some product categories are pretty recession-proof. Others are highly recession-sensitive. So you have to know what it is for your situation, and definitely take that into consideration. And then you want to, as you're analyzing your market segments, start eliminating the ones that are going to get hit hard by recession or that are going to retrench, heavily because of fear of recession, and definitely factor that in.
One additional question.
Mm-hmm.
When you take up something like the LLMs that are currently in the news, like ChatGPT, everyone seems to be interested in trying it out, and you're not even sure what kind of applications or avenues that it could be applicable in. So how would you capitalize, monetize, or target in those circumstances?
You mean if you were ChatGPT or
yes,
what?
yeah,
what?
correct.
If you were ChatGPT,
if you had a
okay.
really innovative product that seems to be really hot.
Yeah. So so you've got a lot of people experimenting. You want to be paying close attention to those people, what they're doing, looking at. Now this is getting a little bit out of the scope of the talk here, because now you're looking at how do you monetize something like ChatGPT, and with whom can you monetize it. But yeah, you're looking at who what are they using it for, what problems are they trying to solve, what is it worth it to them to solve that problem, talking to them about what it is they're trying to accomplish, and figuring out is the business case there. For example, you could say, well, this could be a threat, for example, to PR firms, because now AI can write the press release. Well, that might be an opportunity, because that saves them a lot of money, and they can put their attention toward letting ChatGPT do the first draft, and then they refine it. And there are going to be situations where people have proprietary content that they don't want to be out there being used by ChatGPT it might learn from your proprietary content, but you don't want it then putting that proprietary content out for other people in what it spits out for other companies. There may be opportunities to have people pay to not have that happen. Let's say if I upload my book into Chat GPT so that it writes some articles for me, but I don't want my book becoming part of public domain. And so, am I willing to pay? I probably am, because it's cheaper than, the time I would spend writing the articles, or at least doing the first draft. So you're looking for, this gets back to, what problem am I trying to solve by uploading my book and getting it to output? And what is that worth to me? So, that's where you want to be talking to customers and watching their behavior.
There may be some general cases of when you have something that gets to be just popular and goes viral on the internet, but it's not yet a business, it's a Kickstarter. And then how do you find something that's sustaining? And all right, I have all kinds of people, from students to retirees, that are all talking about this and going to the website and whatnot, and then trying to stumble upon and figure out after the fact, backwards as it were, all right, who of these are going to be around so that I have a business and I'm not some fad that lasted for 2 months and then disappeared and was never heard from again.
Yeah, I mean, Instagram was kind of a happy accident. YouTube was a happy accident. I remember seeing those guys present back in 2007, shortly after they came online, and it was catching on like wildfire, but they still hadn't, figured out quite how they were going to monetize it or any of that. It was before they got bought by YouTube. So there are those situations, despite what I said about start with the market problem. Although I will say they did start with a market problem, in that they were trying to solve their own problem. They were like, back then, maybe I'm telling you guys stuff you already know, but that was when people were emailing video clips around, but the files were getting to be too big to email. And the problem became, how do we efficiently host and serve these videos? There was a time when people would email little funny video clips around, or video clips of their kids or whatever. And so the guys who started YouTube were trying to figure out how, trying to solve their own problem. And then it turned out to be a problem that everybody could relate to. And that's when it really caught on like crazy. And so, they knew their market because they were their market. So even in that case, it was a problem, then a solution. But you're right. Sometimes you're struggling trying to figure out, okay, it's caught on, but how do we, it's not so much of a product market fit problem, because the market has embraced it. It's a monetization problem. And how do you demonstrate and get paid for the value? So you're creating value. How do you capture that value? By getting paid for what you created. So that's a kind of a separate talk.
Yeah, Theresa, I've been in several companies and groups that have the follow the money syndrome, and they follow all the customers without really much of a thought towards the market. And after a year or 2 or 3, we end up to be in a big giant snarl, and haven't really done a market analysis. And now we're in a bit of a chaotic situation that is a difficult one. How would you address that if you were dropped into that situation and asked to clean it up?
So are you saying that you've got, so instead of selling to instead of markets, you sort of sold to whoever wanted to buy what you had? Now
Yep.
You've got customers in all kinds of different sectors, and
Yes.
nothing really in common, and they have unique needs different from their needs, and now you're trying
Yes.
to meet everybody's freaking needs. Is that it?
Yep. Engineering is tearing their hair out. There's no
Right.
cohesive development cycle. It's a mess.
Yeah. And is this a software product or what?
I've been in a software product. I've been in a systems product as well, software and
Okay.
hardware.
Yeah. Well, so often there's sort of a rationalization process that has to happen to just analyze, look at, who are you serving? Because very often you'll see companies decide to get out of certain markets. They just say, we aren't going to try to, that market, what they need is so different from what our core customer needs that, we're gonna eventually retire these customers or find a different way to get their needs met, or just serve them but not sell to any more like them. So I would do an analysis of the customers you do have and look at what are the, similar to the process I just took you through, to say, what do they have in common? What don't they have in common? You could actually have that checklist and have your customers across the top, or your groupings of customers across the top. We have 3 global banks. We have 2, state governments. We have 4 food manufacturers, and just kind of look at those segments and see, retroactively, what is the best sweet spot for us, and how would we draw our dartboard even using our current customers. And those outer circles, may be ones that you eventually let go of. Yeah, it's always a bad sign when everybody's getting pulled in a million different directions, because then you're trying to please everyone and you don't please anyone.
Yeah, it's difficult to say no to customers too. Customers who
Yeah.
are paying you money.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And sadly, sometimes it's your longest serving customers, your longest, oldest customers that are increasingly the least strategic for you.
Right.
And, how do you deal with that? Over time, that segment represents less and less opportunity. I've been, with clients who were facing that situation in their markets, it's like that whole, cash cow or sacred cow, the Boston Consulting Group, or one of those 2x2 matrices, with the sacred cows and the cash cows. And, you have to figure out, how you're going to gracefully exit a market. I know of some software companies right now that are, they were struggling, and they have basically declared, we don't sell to any company that's smaller than X. And it has, a lot of their partners, it really leaves a lot of their partners out in the cold who were selling to smaller companies. But they've taken a hard line with it.
And I've seen the opposite with a startup saying, we're not going to sell to a company bigger than this, because just handling a tech support call from an army, 50 calls coming in, and you're a company, they're bigger. Their administrator base is larger than your entire startup population.
Yeah. Salesforce, Salesforce.com started out, they were kind of going up against Siebel, which was very broad and had grown from Salesforce automation to, CRM. And initially Salesforce's goal was, we're going to take what Siebel does and strip away all the extra stuff, and we're just going to solve the Salesforce automation problem and simplify. And, they stripped it down. They had a prototype, or they had it running in an apartment. I tell a lot of Salesforce stories in my book, because I watched that company rise, and everything they did was just textbook, just did it the right way. Who knows what's going to happen now that they're so big, but their rise, their growth story is phenomenal, and they did all the right things. But they had the product there, and they let people come in and play with it. These are the innovators. They let them come in and play with it and tell them what they liked, what they didn't like. And they started noticing that they were getting a lot of inquiries from small businesses, which is not really who they were targeting. And I remember being with an early, I'm going to date myself, but an early internet company, and we got a call from them, and they were just perfect for smaller companies that had high turnover in their sales forces, because every time we lost a salesperson, all their contacts walked out the door with them. And I was trying to figure out a way to not have that happen. And, but Salesforce started realizing, oh my God, we're getting a lot of traction with these small companies, and they made a conscious decision to really focus on that market. And that's where their beachhead ended up being, is, young technology companies. So, they stumbled into that because they were paying attention to what was happening in the market. Any other questions? Was this helpful? I'm just curious as to whether this is what you kind of were hoping for, and whether there's anything I omitted. You can put it in the chat if you want.
Few chats
All right.
scrolling there. Yeah.
So Tom, I'll hand it back to you.
Excellent.
I had one comment, and that is, I'll visualize this forever. Do you want to be a drop of ink in a glass of water or the ocean? Not a hard choice. Thank you.
Yes, and I'll echo that thank you and multiply it by the rest of the audience attending, and those of you that will be watching on YouTube later. But yeah, thank you, Theresa. This was very, very insightful. I think it's always great to step back from the noise and think strategically. And we can all use that, because Silicon Valley is a very busy place. And product managers are pulled so many directions. So having just kind of a pure focused discussion around strategy and what's the market you're addressing, some of these basic questions are so important to be able to focus on and have a really knowledgeable analysis and a framework and some tools to think about. And so that, I think, is useful for any product manager out there. We're always launching new products or shifting things and trying to grow, and all of that is about addressing a market. So I think this is highly relevant and useful. So thank you, Theresa, and passing along the thanks from everyone else, and looking forward to some future events coming up later this year. We're hoping to have a couple of after work get-togethers during the summer. So stay tuned on that. Again, if there was anybody that wanted to connect in and posted a link in there, go ahead and grab that from the chat before the call ends. And we also have another speaker lined up for next month. Stay tuned. We didn't quite get all of the things there, but we've actually got quite a good list of speakers lined up for the summer. So I'm very excited to see what comes next, and looking forward to seeing some of you in person. So stay tuned on the website, and we will be in touch with you soon. Thanks all.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Virtual round of applause for everyone.
Thank you, Theresa.
All right,
Thank
we'll
you,
see you
everyone.
all soon. Thanks, Theresa.
Thank you, Theresa.
Thank you. Bye-bye.